Indeed, indeed. So I want to delve into, since we already started talking about them, the Department of Education. So the Department of Education has a huge budget, over 30 billion with a B, as I always say, a billion. And when it comes to the educational outcomes of our children, um, supermajority of our students, who supermajority of Black and Hispanic, um, have low proficiency rates, are not proficient in English, writing, and in doing math. Our graduates graduate illiterate and illiterate. We all see the articles coming out every year. Why did the Department of Education allow me to graduate? I can't read. But they have a 30 billion with a $30 billion budget. So my question to you, Mr. Adams, is how are you going to hold the Department of Education more accountable for the educational outcomes of the children? That's question number one. And then my second question is going to delve into the issue with programs such as Gifted and Talented, as well as the specialized high school exam. So we'll first start with those three.
Well, first, no one running for mayor has a more comprehensive overview of education like I do. No one. Because we have education wrong. And, Monica, we have so many things wrong in our city. We are doing things the way we do because we've always done them that way. And it is time for us to say, if we are going to rebuild, let's have an opportunity to rebuild right. If you were to build the building you are in right now, and you did not lay the proper foundation, the beams, correctly, it doesn't matter how fancy the rooms are. It doesn't matter how beautiful the paint is. It doesn't matter what furniture you put inside. The foundation is wrong. And it's only a matter of time before it's going to reveal its structural frailties. That's where we are in education. Think about this for a moment.
Yeah.
I have been meeting with a group of pediatricians and neurologists, and we have delved into education. And they say, Eric, we focus education from K through 12. They said, that's wrong. It's the first 1,000 days of life. And people interpret the first 1,000 days of life as when the baby's out of the mother's womb. That is not true. In the first 4 weeks of life, a baby has 10,000 brain cells. In 24 weeks in the mother's womb, it has 10 billion. Those brain cells that grow becomes the foundation of a child's ability to function, learn, and develop for his entire life. But the strength of those brain cells depends on the nutrition of the mother when she's carrying the child. So if a mother doesn't have the right iron, the right folic acid, the right iodine, that baby can be born with irreversible learning abilities, cognitive issues, and other learning abilities. So when we ignore the foundation of education, which is prenatal, then by the time these children get into the formal part of education in the school building, they're playing catch up. In some cases, they will never catch up. That's why you see such a high level of learning disabilities, cognitive issues, and so many other mental health issues. It starts earlier. So what do I do as the mayor? I say education is no longer K through 12. I say we have a disjointed system, and education now becomes prenatal through career. Every mother and her first child receives a doula. That doula teaches the child brain development, which 80% of the brain develops in the first 1,000 days. Teaches the mother nutrition, what foods you should be eating. Teaches the mother in a real way what this all means, because no one has really given the mother in economically challenging communities what this all means when she's carrying that baby and those first 1,000 days, talking to the child, allowing the brain development. No one has ever really given these examples. So by the time we hand over the children to 3K, we've handed over the children that had the foundation they need to go into 3K. And then 3K reinforces what the child learned in the first 1,000 days. Then we hand them over to K through 12, and we incorporate a system that we've learned from those who are in career and businesses. Because remember, we send children to school so they can either start their own business or be employable. So then we need to have those who are going to be employing people be part of the curriculum that we create so the children are ready to be employed. So as we build out our curriculum, we can't lock out those career and those industries. They should be part of shaping our curriculum. And our teachers need to not live in this bubble of education and not know that there's a real world out there that we're preparing our children for. School can't continue to be within a classroom. We have to stop schooling and start educating, and it must be part of our entire city. Then we need to incorporate real trades from CTE programs, how to be a plumber, how to be a carpenter, how to be an electrician. Even if you go to college, you may have to pay your own way through college. It's good to be gainfully employed with skills that you have. I paid my way through college, 2 classes at a time, but I had skills that I can use in the process. That is what we must do in education. Then we need to look at the structure of the school year. Tell me, Monica, why do we take summers off? That's an agrarian calendar. That was when children needed 2 months off to go on the farm to pick corn. And it blows my mind, why we keep having summers off. That is an agrarian calendar when children took 2 months off in the summer to go work on the farm. So we have to stop doing things that we've always done just because we've always done them. Those 2 months off, science has shown they cause a summer slide and our children never catch up. So it doesn't mean a child must sit in a classroom, but what we could do is use remote learning to reinforce the skills that children will need in a artificial intelligent computer learning environment: critical thinking, communication, working in groups, financial literacy, two hours a day throughout the summer, continuous instruction, that our children won't have that summer slide or that brain drain. Like I had a brain drain that I kept calling you Monica when I should be saying Mona. I just got, I got a brain drain, but so Mona, that's what I'm talking about. Reimagining education, having summer internships, connecting people, exposure. Many of our children are failing every day due to the lack of exposure. They grow up in the same communities. They live in the same housing developments. They in the same blocks. We need to expose our children to the arts, to the museums, to the cultures, to different places, to different entities. That's what reimagining school is. Our children are bored with school. We spend $350,000 for a child from the time they go through kindergarten to 12th grade. And we have to ask ourselves, what have we got for our investment in those children? An overbloated bureaucracy and children leaving school frustrated, angry, and not prepared for their future.
Now that, unfortunately, you are correct. But yes, so Mr. Adams, this situation, this very contentious situation with the specialized high schools and the specialized high school exams, you were a New York State Senator, so you're very familiar, of course, with the Heck-Calendar Act, the backstory with that, and the problems that we're having right now with regards to the specialized high school exams that some people say it's a discriminatory exam because children aren't prepared. But then we also have families who support specialized high schools. My daughter attended a specialized high school. So my question to you, because as mayor and with mayoral control, you have control of the school system. And Mayor Bloomberg, under mayoral control, created additional specialized high schools because the original specialized high schools, as we know, are Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, Brooklyn Tech, and LaGuardia. The additional 5 that we have right now, those were created by Mayor Bloomberg. Lehman High Schools, Staten Island one, the one in Queens. So my question to you is, I know you hear from parents on both sides. How do you plan on addressing the specialized high school debate, as well as the specialized high school exam? Because as mayor, the buck will stop with you under mayoral control.
Thank you for that. First, 3 of the schools we have no control over. As you indicated, the state would determine that if they're going to repeal the head calendar decision. 5 of them is under the control of the mayor because Mayor Bloomberg started new schools. And I'm saying this, those are 10% of our students. We are in a place of a triage system. Do we want to use all of our political capital and energy fighting for something dealing with 10% of the students? I'm going to come back to that. I need to move, how do I fix where 90% of my students are? That's where I want to go right now. And so the first thing I would do, just as Mayor Bloomberg started 5 new schools, when you look at the thousands of children who take the exam and don't get into the specialized high schools, I say, hey, let's create 5 more. Let's create more seats and use a different criteria. If we don't want to use a test only, let's not use a test only. Let's use a series of things to make the determination of the 5 new schools we put in place. Let's make sure we get that working, that is successful, and then let's revisit the other 8. But first, let's make sure before we tamper with something, let's get something right. Let's build 5 more, and then let's put our real energy into how do we reform where the bulk of our students are that are not receiving a quality education. Because if we remove the SHSAT examination, if we remove that altogether, that is not going to fix our problem. You're still going to have 65% of Black and brown children not meeting proficiency. And so that's a symbolic battle. I know it brings a lot of emotion. I know people are angry about that, but we need to put the bulk of our energy into how do we fix a school system that every year fails Black and brown students. And if we're using a triage system, then that triage system says SHAT is not the first thing we need to be fighting for. We need to be fighting for fixing those other schools.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, Mr. Adams, because there's just so much focus on those few schools when we have a school system with hundreds of schools. But again, I guess it's the hot topic. But yeah, we do need to focus on the 90%.
Yes.
Not just the 10%.
And it takes a lot of discipline, Mona, not to focus on the hot topics. We should focus on the right topics. That's discipline. Because if all the noise, you'll get distracted from the mission. The mission is every child in every block in every school should have an opportunity to be educated and be prepared for the future. And we should ask ourselves, the question we should ask ourselves, what is preventing that? and list out the things that's preventing that and move based on the highest level of priority, that we remove the highest number of barriers. And trust me when I tell you, SHSAT is not at the top of the list.
I personally, I agree. So, I also just want to touch on gifted and talented. The gifted and talented exam that was recently voted down by the panel for educational policy. For some of our viewers who are unaware, it's an exam that children can take at the age of 4 to decide whether or not they're gifted and talented and if they can attend one of the GNT schools. A few years ago, in Brooklyn, District 16 finally got their first GNT program. The parents in Bedford-Stuyvesant advocated for that. For you as mayor, what will be your position on GNT programs? Would you increase GNT programs because right now there aren't enough, or will you simply scrap the GNT program?
You know, it's amazing that we had several districts that did not have GNT programs. We had parents who had to travel far distance, parents who had to go through great hurdles to get to the GNT programs. I believe that we do have children who learn differently and who have certain skills, certain talents, and we should not deny that. Number one, I supported an opt-out for the testing instead of children having to figure out how to take the gifted and talented testing. We should have parents opt out. That's number one. Number two, we should look at a full scope of gifted and talent. We're losing a lot of children who are gifted and talented because we're not using a cross section of ways of how to distinguish these various gifts. You could have someone that English is a second language, and they may have some great gifts and skills that we are overlooking. So whichever way we determine how to reinforce and promote those gifts and talents, we need to make sure we are looking at them and testing and determining every scope of those gifts and talents. And second, going back to what I said earlier, Mona, we're setting our kids up for failure. Because if we're not, as we start to build out this pipeline, of course, if you came from an affluent community that was stable, good nutrition, reinforce your brain development, by the time you get 4 years old, those first 1,000 days of life for you are totally different from the first 1,000 days of the life of the child that lived in public housing, that lived in a tenement building, that lived in some difficult times. We need to equal the playing field. We spend too much time focusing on what children learn and not enough time focusing on how children learn. That is where we need to put our energy, because we have it wrong now.
No, I think a lot of parents would, actually, I don't know any parent that would disagree with that. So continuing on, Mr. Adams, I want to touch on housing.